welcome. Thank you for being here this morning. My name is Kelsey Brannon. I am the Director of Radio at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and WSUM Madison Student Radio. Again, thank you so much for being with us on this Sunday morning. WSUM's 20th anniversary is on Tuesday, and we're proud to celebrate with a series of workshops that are led by station alumni. Before we get into this workshop, I want to take a moment to reflect on a loss that the WSUM community suffered earlier this week. WSUM's co-founder and first general manager, Dave Black, passed away over last weekend. Dave was absolutely integral to the station's launch, exponential growth, and subsequent success. Over 2,000 alumni have passed through the station, and Dave left an impression on each and every one of them. Many of us even credit our entire careers to Dave, myself included. Over the past week, I've spoken with students and alumni about whether or not these workshops should continue in light of that loss. And the consensus was that it seemed right to move forward because Dave was relentlessly devoted to providing educational opportunities to students and community members alike. So we believe that he would want this particular show to go on. Before I introduce our speakers for this morning's workshop, I'd like for us to hold a moment of silence in Dave's memory. Thank you, everyone. More information about Dave's legacy can be found at wsum.org. We will turn our attention now to this morning's workshop, Strategic Communications Careers After College Radio. I'm pleased to introduce Gu and Ashley Watkins. She graduated from UW-Madison with a double major in journalism and economics. A passion for storytelling and a curious mind led her into the field of digital marketing. She is a global director of integration and digital transformation at Omnicom Media Group. This has given her a great opportunity to empower teams worldwide and accelerate the journey from ideas to outcomes. Ashley is a senior manager of strategic planning and executive communications at United Airlines. She spent over a decade in telecommunications, serving in various roles from sales and marketing to operations and communications at US Cellular. Ashley majored in communication arts and philosophy, graduating from UW-Madison in 2008. She also held the music director role at WSUM from 2006 to 2008. She and Ashley, thank you so much for being here. I'll let the two of you take it away.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And welcome to you all who have kind of, woken up bright and early to join this workshop. And we really hope that you have a good kind of conversation with us, and feel free to chime in as Ashley and I are having this kind of like discussion here. And we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A as well. Yeah. Oh, Ashley, do you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to say good morning to everyone and thank you for joining today. As she has said, I also want to give a big thank you to Kelsey. It's been a turbulent time, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity and just her leadership in bringing us all together today. So as she's mentioned, we'd like to have this be an easy breezy conversation, and we'd love to talk about like our time at WSUM and how it evolved into the careers that we have now. Chief, it's okay. I want to ask you, like, from your personal perspective, like, what did you want to do when you left WSUM and left UW-Madison?
That's a great question, Ashley. So I actually wanted more time to think about what I really wanted to do. Because initially when, towards the end of my college career at UW, I was thinking about potentially going into print media. So writing for newspapers as a journalist. But then I quickly realized that it's a field that was quickly shrinking with limited job opportunities. So I actually went into a graduate program after my time at UW to really understand, give myself a bit more time about what I really want to do. So I went into a master's program in communication, and initially thinking I might explore the academia a little bit, and go on to pursue a PhD. But later on, I found out that my interest there is really around kind of being a generalist, touching across more breadth than depth. So that's how I kind of evolved my trajectory from there. Curious to hear your response, Ashley.
Yeah, so I thought deeply about like where I was in 2008 when I left UW-Madison. And if you think back to 2008, that was also a time when the economy took a turn. And at the time I left, I had my piece of paper in hand. And if I had my way, I would have wanted to be a tour manager for some band. I would have probably been in a van or an airplane with a group and managed a tour, probably a punk band or a ska band or something like that. And then when I really thought about it, the role that I have now in strategic planning and communications is actually just being a tour manager for executives, because it has some of the same elements, because they're traveling a lot, they have speaking engagements, no one plays an instrument usually. But in many ways, like the vision that I had for myself kind of came to fruition just in a way that was probably a lot bigger than I imagined. So it was just very interesting how things kind of come full circle in that way. Chi, I'm also thinking about for you how WSUM came into influencing you getting into the strategic comms role.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I think initially when I majored in journalism, and initially when I came into WSUM, the goal is to kind of treat this as an internship and gain more experience across different formats of media. So I did achieve that goal in terms of understanding kind of different sorts of medium, which would later on kind of open my eyes to different media vehicles to drive outcomes for marketing. And I also think, what WSUM gifted me was that editorial freedom to keep learning and expanding yourself, right? Like it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to get your own show, but to run it well, you need to constantly like brush up on your knowledge, on the topic, like in during that time, it was like music around the world, folk music specifically, that was passionate about. So every week, in order to kind of curate my show, I had to think about which countries I should focus on. What are the kind of tunes that I can gather in order to bring to my audience? So I think that curation process, and that focus on the audience, and making sure every time we have that live moment, I can give something to them, benefited my journey into strategic communication, marketing specifically, right? Because also day to day, my job consists of kind of, bringing the value to the audience. If I bring a group of 20 people into this meeting room, I should share something valuable that they can take away with. And hopefully that something can snowball into a bigger initiative for people around them. Yeah. So
I totally agree about the amount of freedom that we had. Sometimes too much freedom. But I think about just my time there, and especially working on what I'm not sure if we still call it that, the exec man team, working as music director and having a formalized role within WSUM is truly getting firsthand experience with running a business and what I like to call a dental floss budget at the time. So having limited resources and trying to maximize them, and then using it to project manage to gain additional access, additional funds, and additional outreach into the communities that we served. And so I think of like Party in the Park. And my first experience with Party in the Park was 2005, where a lot of energy was put into putting an amazing show with amazing bands. And that day there were 40-mile-per-hour winds. And we were right on the lake. And I remember having windburn, but I remember being so fulfilled in the moment and just making a successful moment, even though there was a lot of obstacles. And then I also think about with executive communications, I see someone who took me under their wing at WSUM who's on right now. His name's Rob. And he had a show already called Paradigm in the Cosmos. And he was so gracious enough to let me join in on the fun. And this was before becoming music director. But I think about just me as Ashley Watkins at that time. Ashley Watkins had a lot of opinions. I still do, but I had a lot of opinions and I was not afraid to share it. And this is the time where I really wish Dave Black were here because he could tell you plenty of stories about me. But I think my perspective on authority was, I don't care who you are, I'm going to tell you what I think. And just thinking about moving into this position where I work with executives on a day-to-day basis, that has been very helpful. That level of freedom that we had at WSUM was very integral in that developing that skill, honing the skill. Just thinking about, there's a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily be comfortable providing their opinion or providing strategic guidance to people who are at certain levels or areas of the business. And so I think even though I needed some refinement, I think that it built in this skill that I carried with me, where if I'm writing on behalf of a leader, I'm going to provide my opinion. If I don't think that's the right approach, I'm going to share it. I may not always win, but I'm going to at least provide an alternative option to get the most bang for the buck. And so I think WSUM was very foundational in me honing that skill set and being really intentional and purposeful about, I don't care who you are, everyone puts their pants on, one leg at a time. And I'm going to approach it as if, we're all one and the same. So it's an extremely great thing to be a part of, because a lot of people take internships, and this was like a full-on role that I was able to have. So I'll stop rambling about how I had a problem with authority, but I'm curious about how a typical day looks like for you in your role.
Yeah, that's a really great question, because like in my role, no day is really typical in the sense that even though I work in digital marketing, I have evolved beyond focusing on a specific discipline. Meaning when I started my career, I would focus on running paid social media, video campaigns, or search campaigns, etc. But now I have a highly hybrid role that spans across digital advertising, data usage, technology, marketing technology, and e-commerce even. So a lot of my day is actually spent on connecting with teams around the world, given my global remit, understanding what their needs are, and then think about what kind of projects, whether it's like a thought leadership piece, whether it's like a POV on the latest media trends, to help them excel. So you can think of this as like a center of excellence setup. And also, I would say another good chunk of my day is spent with clients, hearing them out on their emergent needs, and start thinking about who from my immediate team or even from the broader company can I pull in order to drive forward a conversation. Let's say metaverse has been on the lips for so many people these days, right? Like, I'm by no means an expert on that topic, but if we see a potential opportunity for clients, this is where we connect our clients with the best experts in our field, in our company, and then have a three-way conversation so that we can all learn about the topic more closely together. So the exciting part of my job is that no day is exactly the same, but also you have to be very kind of diligent and proactive about your desk. So throwing the question back to you, Ashley, what does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, before I get into that, I think that one of the key differences between the role that you have and the role that I have is that you have clients. And so you're serving kind of like a broader, more diverse group. And in my role, I am in service to United Airlines. And so I would say a typical day for me usually involves a lot of meetings. And it's usually because we're marching towards a particular goal for major projects. And so what I mean by that is major announcements that have what I like to call many tentacles. And so that means different aspects of corporate communications because it's broad. We have social media, we have public relations. In our main, we have 7 hubs. And so we have hub communicators that are essentially PR people at a more localized level. Then you also have our storytelling team. So think of like video storytelling, as well as our employee engagement and employee comms. And so thinking through those multifaceted areas of the corporate communications, we come together for these major initiatives. So I would lead a major announcement. So perfect example would be our sustainable aviation fuel flight that we did in early December of 2021, or the grand opening of our flight academy in Arizona. And so we bring those cross-functional elements in corporate communications, as well as the business owners to bring them in to say, what's the timeline? How can we tell this story? How can we reach out to our external contacts to gain engagement? And how do we get our employees involved? I think in many ways, a lot of people think about communications from that external PR piece. And I'm tasked with the role of how do we holistically look at this? Is there an opportunity for our employees to be involved and engaged and feel really proud about what we're doing? And so those many meetings turn into these very cool announcements where we really have the rubber meet the road about, what our intentions are as an airlines, what is our philosophy and our ethics and our main goal. And it's connecting people and uniting the world and doing the most good. So it's really interesting work. And then there's the executive communications element. And so I'm tasked with briefing our CEO and president on some of those initiatives or their speaking engagements, developing their talking points or script writing for videos, and having that collaboration within my corporate communications group, as well as the person themselves, and getting it across the finish line in a timely manner. So that's kind of like a typical day in the life where there's always meetings, but there's the meetings about different things. And then it reaches a point in time where you're like, all right, we did it. And so that ties a lot back to WSUM, where with the exec man team, where you have this opportunity to get something developed, whether party in the park or Steak on the Lake Fest or community outreach opportunities, and work on those timelines and those projects to get to the desired goal.
Well, it sounds like that you actually work with a wide range of stakeholders in terms of a seniority, levels of authority, etc. What do you think is like the key skill sets that help you achieve success when you're basically coordinating, orchestrating across so many different parties within oftentimes crunch time?
I think it's great to have infinite curiosity and to really enjoy what you're doing. I think sometimes people look at I'm going to do this as a means to an end, or I'm going to do this to include this on my resume. And at the end of the day, you have to, at its core, enjoy what you're doing. Even if you do have to have a lot of meetings and do things you may not enjoy a lot. I think, having infinite curiosity, having an interest in people, and understanding how to navigate different personalities, how to bring people together, is how are you being a connector? I think as communicators, as people who are creative, you have to find a way to connect the dots and paint the picture. I think what I see, and I'm not sure, Chi, if you see this as well, is that business owners or project owners will come to you and they're like, we have this thing, we want to get it out now. And they don't have a vision. And a lot of times as communicators, you have to interpret what the business has decided and figure out how to amplify it. And so I think WSUM was very key in letting me leverage my creativity to get to those points in time, those goals and the results that were desired. Because, you know, a lot of people can think in one particular way, and I came through the back door. Let's just say that. And so I think in many ways that has been an advantage for me, because I'm coming from a completely different angle where I'm like, well, why don't we reach out to this person? Or have we thought about doing this differently? And so I think that has served me well. So Chi, I'm really excited to hear like how, what characteristics do you think have made you successful?
Yeah, I think, you know, first of all, I'll go back to your point about infinite curiosity. I think that open-mindedness to learning new things, getting exposed to different perspectives is key to growth, not only as a professional, but also as a person. You know, it's like, for example, when I'm, you know, talking to a team member based in Singapore, and I found out that he's originally from Italy. So I started talking, you know, about my trip to Italy with him, and you know, use the one or two Italian phrases, right? It's just these little things that are a reflection of your curiosity, but also serve to connect people much closer, that have really worked well for me. And I think a second thing is probably like a resulting characteristic from that is what you alluded to, Ashley, is resourcefulness. You know, like, I think both of us play that connector role, and a lot of us, you know, on this call will or are already playing that role. It's like leveraging all the different peoples and components and then bring them together so that 1 + 1 is bigger than 2. So you need to think about, when you get a question or task, not necessarily the most you know, straightforward way, the first idea that comes to your mind, but also kind of think about, lay out your different options and think about which one could be potentially most impactful, not only for today, but also for later. And I think the last characteristic would probably be a very strong, diligent sense of priorities. We talk to a large number of people. It's easy to get lost in the shuffle of different people's priorities, but I think it's important to stick to your agenda and what's really important to you. Throughout my career, I've had excellent bosses and not so excellent bosses, right? So oftentimes it's easy to be subject your performance to a boss's expectation for you. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, think back to your you know, school days as a student. I can remember vividly, like, teachers who had high expectations of me tend to generate better performance versus, you know, otherwise. And in the early days of my career, I found that as well. So it's important to kind of see yourself as this independent, self-reliant, self-sufficient being that, yes, you know, boss's appreciation plays an important role in your satisfaction of the job, but don't let that define yourself. You know, you still got to do what you feel passionate about, and people around you in the organization broadly will come to appreciate your value.
That, especially the piece about just, yeah, it's inevitable that you're not always going to have the greatest boss or the greatest leader. And I think, you know, going back to Dave's leadership during my time at WSUM, you know, I thought he was a wonderful boss. He gave me a lot of grace when sometimes I didn't deserve it. And I've seen him do that for people throughout the decades and years that he's been at WSUM. And I think too, after my time at UW-Madison and working at the station, I sought that out. So I would seek out the mentors that in many ways embody the same values as Dave. And I think a lot of like what also helps people be successful and get to the roles that we have as well as relationships. I wish everyone was on camera because I'd ask everyone to raise their hand or not, because I'm curious to know like how many of you feel comfortable networking. Because I would think that in many ways, most people would say, I'm not that comfortable with networking. It just feels like, a grip and grin kind of situation where you're kissing babies and shaking hands. And that's how I felt at the time as a younger person, was that doesn't feel authentic to me. It's like, I don't want to be like, hey, here's my business card, and I've learned over time, it's not about that. It's about the relationships that you build. I think about the friendships and the connections that I've built from WSUM. I literally live an 8-minute walk from the former community outreach coordinator, Mary Beth Johnson. And we're still really good friends to this day. And so I think about the mentorships that I've had from other people throughout my career, that has gotten me to my next step, that has motivated me to get to my next step. And I encourage everyone to figure out how you authentically engage with people to get that network and the groups of people that you rely on to get to your next steps, because that's how I ended up at United Airlines. It was actually from a person who became my mentor after he did not hire me for a job. And he left US Cellular. And it feels great to talk to people who are in Wisconsin because they actually know what I'm talking about. I say US Cellular, but he left US Cellular and went to United, and he posted on LinkedIn about an open role on his communications team. And I almost didn't apply for it because I was actually in escrow on my first condo. And I thought, well, I don't know if leaving your job of 10 years at US Cellular is a good idea to do that when they're combing through your financial information. It was actually my mom who said the timing could work out. And so I reached out to this person who's named Steve Jones, and I went for it. And the timing ended up working out. And it was because of the network and the mentorship and the relationship that I built that in June of 2019, I went from closing on my condo that Monday, putting my 2 weeks notice in at US Cellular, then the next week moving, and then a week and a half later, joining United Airlines. So it's just the relationships that you built and going after it and saying, well, what if this does work out? Not holding yourself back has been really critical for me. So I'm curious for you, Chi, like what aspects of your career or in your history that your network or your relationships or your mentors has like paved an opportunity for you?
Yeah, I think the first aspect is similar to your experience, Ashley. It's you are lucky enough with your first mentor, right? It oftentimes comes in the most organic form, and then over time, through that great mentorship, it could be your first manager, it could be one of your favorite professors, it could just be someone who's slightly older than you, or your parents, right? And finding someone who, when you bring an idea to that person, instead of them saying, so what, they will react with, why not? That mindset And I was lucky in the sense that early on in my career, I had two great managers, through my internship that I still stay in touch with. And they set a great role model and established the qualities I know that I'll be looking for in future mentorships. It's like, hey, this person should know his or her stuff, expertise really well. And then, is also a humble and nice person to help at the same time. So this speaks to the personality and knowledge of the individual in both ways. So that has kind of like over time, I started to form a better picture of what qualities I'm looking for in a mentorship. And whenever I join a new team or a company, I would ask my boss or even like another person I already know as a senior leader, hey, I'm looking for this kind of qualities in a mentor. Can you recommend some names to me? That has worked well. So Ashley, apparently I'm seeing this question right now from the audience, and I think it'd be great to kind of like bring that back to you, and if you want to start like sharing your thoughts about how to effectively network with people already established in their industry. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think in many ways, like you have to find your own rhythm or pace or your what fits your personality. So I would say that you can probably tell that I crack a lot of jokes, and I think that's always been a part of me. And so I think I use that as an avenue to make connections with people. And so to effectively network can be deeply personal. And I think that it's not always done the same way. And so I would say, like, what are your strengths personally with your personality? Because for me, I'm technically an introvert. And so like reaching out to people and being active, it's a drain on my personal battery. But how do I put myself out there? So when you network, it could just be, I always call it asking someone to prom. It's kind of like you reach out to them and you say, hey, I saw that you have experience in X, Y, and Z, and I'm really interested in learning more about this. Do you have time to set up time for a Zoom coffee chat? I think that some people, well, I think a lot of people actually create a story in their head that, oh, this person's not going to help me. This person doesn't want, they don't have time for me. And I think what you realize is that people have time for you. People will make the time for you. You just have to show up. You have to show that you are ready. You are ready to hear them. You're ready to be, have your opinions or your thought processes challenged. And I think that is the foundational pieces of building an effective network, is having a diverse perspective, having people really kind of like open and expand what you thought was possible. So I really think it's just like kind of taking that leap of faith, having that curate the curiosity. And you'll actually, in many ways surprise yourself that if you, make that first step and you show your genuine interest, people are very willing to help you and really willing to help you learn and help you navigate your way. So Kalina, I appreciate you asking the question, because I think that's like one of the biggest obstacles for a lot of people is like, well, how do you network? Like, how do I, in some ways it can be your friends, but also I encourage people to like think outside of like just your friends. And I think as you start to do it more, it gets easier, and you build up your own network.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think to add to that, I think going back to my student days when I was doing like networking, it's not within my comfort zone as well. I consider myself an extrovert, but I don't want to network for the sake of networking. Also, whenever I network with someone established in the industry, there seems to be a need to impress the other person. Like to be like, hey, I really know your things and etc. But you don't need to, right? Like I think what we really value here is a curiosity. And when you come to you can spot alum on LinkedIn, and then like write a quick notes online to that person. And the key here is to ask a specific question. I think this aligns with what Ashley mentioned, right? If you just say, hey, I just want to network, I don't know what you're looking for, so I don't know how I can help you. But if you have a specific question for me, I know number one, you have the due diligence. I can actually help you with that specific question. So when that happens, minimal effort from your side, but it makes the conversation exchange much more valuable later on, and it could even blossom into an ongoing mentorship rather than just a one-off conversation.
For sure. And so I think it wouldn't be, well, is there another question in the chat?
No, that's just.
We're going to say thanks. All right. So I think that this is, probably the most popular question for every Zoom meeting or talk. But when she and I were, connecting about, how do we think we want to, have this format and all that, like we started talking about the pandemic. And I know that, students in many ways didn't get the same opportunity as some of us old folks, as I like to say, for the college experience. And I know that in many ways in comms, it's, we have been a unexpected but critical piece about the pandemic. So I'm curious how, the pandemic has changed your career, your perspective, how you work or operate.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I think at this point, each one of us could probably write a book about how we feel about it. I think the biggest impact on me is changing my perspective about growth. Because for a long time, I've always been an avid fan of travel. So that means, I want to visit 2 or 3 new countries every single year, etc. That's where most of my discretionary income goes to. But the pandemic has really put a halt on that. And I have to kind of, do a lot of planning, etc. And really for a long time, basically I couldn't travel anywhere. And that made me anxious for a while because I feel like my growth, my understanding of the world comes from the steps I've taken around the globe. But now I couldn't do it. So I took an alternative, which is to travel with my mind by reading more. Since graduation from college, I would say I probably read like 3 or 4 books per year. But the first year of pandemic, I actually read about like 30 plus books. So like after that, I realized, hey, you know what? I can strike up even more interesting conversations with people, and I can relate to people more because I mentally expose myself to so many different perspectives. So I don't have to be on the road all the time, but I can create a road for myself mentally by tapping into these great thoughts, whether it's books or talks like this, or other seminars you sign up for. The key idea is that growth can come from many different angles, and once you open your mind to it, it's kind of unleashes new development opportunities for yourself. So that's my biggest learning from the pandemic. Aside from that, the other thing I would mention is that in the past, we tended to take kind of a human face-to-face communication for granted. But now I realize how precious it is. Even like when you meet up with a coworker, you have to plan well ahead of time, and then that time becomes really valuable. It's like almost like going to a special event, well planned out. So that cherishment of human connections is something that is kind of refreshing for me too.
I always like to tell people that I had a good 7 months at United before things took a turn. And in many ways, like as I said, I wanted to be a tour manager of bands. But then, travel was very important to me, and exploring the world was very important to me. And, I set my sights for working in the aviation industry, and then finally got there, got my opportunity and got my chance, had that great 7 months, and then everything took a turn. We went from, 2019 being one of a banner year for United Airlines to seeing this wave of shutdowns from Asia to Europe to the United States, from flying, at max capacity to 5% of our schedule. And then thinking, what did I just do? Did I really just enter into the biggest crisis that the world has seen in a very long time? And am I going to even be able to stay? Why did I just leave a company with a lot of job security to enter a world that is just now just like in a state of flux and a lot of uncertainty? And, I was very fortunate that, I was able to stay and expand and grow even in the midst of it, and find a deeper appreciation and understanding of how, even though the world was in a crisis, how our company stepped up in that crisis. We were the first to get the Pfizer vaccine from Europe to stateside. Our cleaning efforts on board. So these are some of the projects that I was able to take on, unexpected projects that we had to take on, to diversity, equity, and inclusion at United Airlines, and it eventually afforded me the opportunity to actually be promoted, because I was in operational communications at the time. And so we worked on network closures, the different requirements to get into different countries, some of the vaccine mandates, all of these different things. And it's just instilled a lot of resilience. And also just sometimes you think that, everything's about to fall apart, and that's not necessarily true. I think it allowed me to tap into really thinking through about how I help and how I dig in and learn, in spite of all of the things that are happening concurrently. How am I being a part of the solutions, and how am I leveraging our corporate values to do the most good, and having an influence in telling that story and helping our employees actually get through the crisis. Because I had the fortune of working from home during the time. But if you think about pilots and flight attendants and our mechanics, you can't fly a plane from home. So, they've been out there serving, people across the world. And it's just how do you honor that? How do you, maximize the good? And so I think one of the things too, I'm not sure how shy our group is, but if there's anyone that wants to come off mute to ask us questions, I want to make sure that we afford the opportunity for that.
Any questions from the audience?
Hi, sorry, I'm Kalina. I asked the question earlier. I had another question for you both. What is, in retrospect, looking back on your college experience, what is one thing you wish you had done that would have better prepared you for your current role or for your future career that that you wish you had taken advantage of when you were in college?
Oh, Ashley, do you want to go first? This is a good question, because we prepared our responses to this question. So I'll give it back to you, Ashley, first.
Well, I think we have a twin response. We were talking about this when we were prepping, and we were both like, I wish I would have studied abroad. From my perspective, I was very focused on I'm gonna get out in 4 years. I'm still paying off my student loans, let's be honest. So for me, I'm I don't need to prolong that. And so to where, and I also worked. And so I worked at the station, and some of you may remember Underground Textbooks, and I also used to DJ at Notchville. And so knowing that I worked and knowing that I wanted to have a certain level of balance, like I would take summer school for like 3 or 4 credits to like minimize like the amount of credits that I took throughout the year to where I was between 12 and 14. And so study abroad, even though I wanted to travel and see the world, I didn't take that opportunity. So I wish I had, because you can tell it, because I think like youth affords a certain like it affords a different like perspective per se.
Yeah, like I would say like study abroad is my biggest regret. Maybe the only major regret over my college life. And since I was an out-of-state student, actually it's cheaper for me to study abroad and studying at Madison. But I was deterred by kind of one advisor's comment when I brought up the idea. He said, "You're already studying abroad." So I was like, "Oh yeah, you're right." So I didn't explore the idea much further than that. In retrospect, I think when you have the opportunity, if you can afford the opportunity, it's Ashley and I were just talking about this earlier. Is like being a student, being able to experience a different country and different culture in its purest form. You can go back there as an adult, maybe through work or through vacation, but it gives you, it's just different, right? You might be looking more for comfort rather than the full immersion into like a local bus, super crowded, while you're sitting right next to humans and animals alike, but you get a true flavor of how people are fighting their way for a better future of themselves. Over time, I think our brain naturally gets less sensitive to this kind of differences. And you need to make a more conscious effort to appreciate things around you. So that's what I wish I could have done, studying abroad, ideally more than one semester, so that you have more time to get situated in, get acclimated with the locals.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. There's a question from Gabrielle. Okay, sorry to hear that your study abroad got canceled. Have you found it more difficult to travel since you started your career? I can start this. So it depends on the company you are with and a potential industry you are going into. Some industries have generous vacation policies. So usually in advertising agencies, which is my world, we tend to have fairly generous time off, which means you still have opportunities to travel abroad. And some companies actually even encourage people to work abroad through internal rotational programs. It could be like a few weeks living, like kind of couch surfing at another coworker's place abroad in a different country via mutual match, or maybe as you progress your career, you request an opportunity to work in a different market on a semi-permanent or a temporary basis. So I don't find it difficult to travel through career or company arrangements, or I do find it potentially more difficult. Let's say when you have families, you have to kind of arrange for and reconcile for interest from different parties in the group versus just following your own interest. So that is a bigger challenge versus traveling after you start your career.
Yeah, I think in many ways, and then your standards change as well, to where I'm not camping. Like it's just me. I don't do glamping. I don't do I need running water and and so it's one of those things too. Like yes, as you get older, like when I need to go out of town and I'm traveling with my mom, like someone needs to watch my 11-year-old cat, stuff like that, where you have to make arrangements and there's more, pomp and circumstances rather than when you're, in your 20s, you can kind of just pick up and go. I think, traveling with different companies. So the irony is that because of my tenure at US Cellular, I had about 5 weeks of vacation. And then in many ways, going to a new company, you typically, kind of hit the reset button because of your seniority to where I'm now at 2 weeks vacation at United Airlines. But at US Cellular, I, developed an even broader, love for travel. I went to Portugal, I went to Paris for the first time, went to Thailand, and I just think it's funny that I'm with a travel company and sometimes travel less, but I travel differently now. So there's a little bit more strategic work that I put in. So interesting things like a coworker and I went to Brussels for about 72 hours. We, what we call non-rev, we flew standby on a Friday and spent the weekend there and flew back on Monday. And so we only took 1 day off. There have been times where I flew this is pre-pandemic, I flew to Philadelphia just for a day and a half and was staying in the same hotel as the Seattle Seahawks. And so I'm just standing outside the hotel, filming Russell Wilson, getting into his team van and whatnot, or tour bus. And so sometimes there's these short, quick hits, or when we did the Arizona grand opening of our flight academy, we have a policy where with business travel, you can stay 48 hours before or 48 hours afterwards. So I stayed in Arizona for 2 days afterwards and missed a snowstorm in Chicago. So that was great. So it's a very interesting way to travel because it's kind of like travel roulette. Sometimes you say, oh, I want to go to Kansas, but really you end up in LA because there's more seats available. But I think with the travel restrictions, it can be there's more layers now because of the entry requirements, the testing to get back in. And what's interesting for our company is that we've deployed more technology to make it easier. So rather than showing up to the airport with your stack of paperwork, you're uploading it into the app, you're getting cleared and approved, digitally the day before when you check in, rather than some other airlines where you have to make it more of a manual process. So that's been interesting to witness on from a firsthand perspective. Any additional questions in the chat or anyone off mute?
I'll go if nobody else wants to. Hi, Ashley.
Hi.
Hey, so I'm curious about kind of tying it all back, right, to those early days. I mean, I know for me, starting at WSUM was like the real start to my career as it emerged. So what through line do you think is there from those very first sort of sparks of interest in getting involved with something like a radio station? And I think, what I'm curious about is how everybody connects to later points in their career. And obviously you've both talked about that at length. And I think that's really helpful. It certainly would have been for me when I was still an undergrad to hear these stories of what people do with this. But what do you both think about the sort of the feeling that you get from your day-to-day jobs and how that maybe connects back to the feeling you got being involved with something like WSUM? Is it a loose connection, or is it still kind of a pretty strong link between the two?
Hey, Rob. This is Rob is the one that took me under his wing for Paradigm in the Cosmos. And I think that I'll say this about WSUM, I think it's a testament to me, if you are in school at UW-Madison, you have to find your people. I remember my first semester when I started, and it was like, I grew up in San Diego. I wanted to do something completely different. That's how I ended up in Wisconsin. And I remember my first semester where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try this. That's not me. I tried that. That's definitely not me. And music, I had always been interested in music in high school. And WSUM really like brought me back. It made me find my people. WSUM was made up of my people. We were a bunch of misfits back then. I feel, I feel like you guys are more refined. Well, we were also still on State Street with questionable couches and graffiti on the walls, which I don't think they do that anymore. And I think that has stuck with me to where it's like, Ashley, you need to find your people. No matter where you are, you need to find the people that get you. And I think with my role now that ties, well, it's also, when I interviewed at United Airlines originally, WSUM was still on my resume. And one of the panelists saw it and she's like, oh, I think my husband was involved with that. And I'm like, really? And it turns out like he had tried to get a show for sports, but he wasn't able, like the schedule was full. But we found that out later, but it opened up this door, this conversation to where it's like, oh, your husband went to UW-Madison. I said, WSUM really, was a big part of my experience. Here's why. And I was able to tell the story about, how it influenced my career. And I think that for the people on this call today is that people can tell when you are really like passionate and involved in something, rather than saying this is a resume maker, I did this for extra hours, or look at me. And I think that WSEM has been a way for me to storytell my experience from a really authentic and personal way. And I think people have really connected to that. And so I think the role that I have now that really makes me feel good is like, I feel like I'm planning party in the parks all year. These big events with a limited budget per se. Oh, it's a bigger budget now, but you really feel like you get the win, and you really feel it. And I feel like the work that I'm doing now is connecting me to the community. It's connecting me to people. It's making a difference. I felt like WSUM, we were making a difference in our own way. And so I think that that's what I carry with me.
Yeah, I'll go really quick. I think that I totally wholeheartedly agree with what Ashley just said, and definitely echo with the point around storytelling. I think that's a quality that has carried along, from WSUM into every day of my career. And then the second quality I would say is just a sense of entrepreneurship. You own your own show. You're in charge of its fate and its development. Right, and this quality translates into how we kind of manage our personal versus professional lives, navigate key projects in our lives, in our day-to-day as well. So that has definitely created a very kind of positive rippling effect into other aspects of my life.
Yeah, I've just been thinking about some of my non-WSUM friends from Madison, and like sometimes they would come into the studio, and how it was really clear that like they were fascinated and they enjoyed being there, but it's not for everybody. I mean, some people, like the thought of being on the air is like terrifying, right? And everybody who had a show already had already made that leap of faith to say like, yeah, I might screw up, but that's okay. Like Ashley was saying, it's about connecting. And for me, yeah, absolutely. That was the best thing about it in general. Like feeling connected to not only the UW community, but Madison as a city, and even further afield from there, considering web streaming and everything. But yeah, like how, when you put it into the perspective of those who didn't do that kind of thing, or had their own great projects they were working on, but it took a certain type of person to get involved in the first place. And I think us all finding each other there is a really important part of that. And that's the lesson that I got from Dave too, was you have to put yourself out there to find community, and you have to do it in a spirit of service. Right. Because it's really not about just us as individuals. It's something that's supposed to be greater than the sum of its parts. So anyway, I'm just pontificating, but I really appreciate you both making the comments that you just did about, your original motivations and how it's continuing. And I have to remind myself too, just as a last thought, it's been quite a while. I mean, I was station manager in 2005, but I was in a job interview at my current employer, just seeing if I, could move up a little bit, very tentatively, because I'm otherwise doing, and I want to stay where I am for a little while longer. But anyway, I was talking about my management experience, and I didn't remember to mention being station manager because so much time had passed, and I kind of regret not bringing that up, because it was such a formative experience. And even if, you don't get involved with the management side, like, again, people respect the ability to get on the air, to run a show, to be an entrepreneur, as she said, and to just take that leap of faith to do something that hasn't been done before. And so any chance to do that is I think worth looking into. And SUM is a place where it's like you could enter in with very little experience, no budget. Like, it's an engine for all of these different great things. So kudos to everybody who's involved with it now, and get the most out of it. That's my unsolicited piece of advice.
Well, thank you, everyone. What's striking to me is that, Dave was also my mentor. So between the four of us on this call that worked with Dave really closely, most of us did it over different eras of Dave's leadership. And what I'm hearing reflected in this call resonates so strongly with my experience with Dave as well. And he just was so consistent with, that type of leadership and the type of values that he was instilling in generation after generation. And so that's kind of wild to think about. But we are at time for this workshop. It's been so inspiring and fulfilling. I wish that we could spend, another hour having Ashley and Chi answer questions and chat about their experience. Thank you both for making the time. It's been amazing to hear from both of you. And thank you to everyone on this call for joining us today. I hope that everybody got something fruitful out of this conversation.
Thank you for this opportunity. Feel free to reach out if you have any follow-up questions.
Yep, same here. If there's anything that I can do to help some fellow WSUM members or UW-Madison members or Madison community members, I am game. You can find me on LinkedIn, Ashley Watkins. But yeah, if there's a way that you want to reach out, I'm here. So thank you so much, Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you both. I can help connect those dots too if there are folks on the call who would like contact information. So feel free to reach out to me as well. All right, thank you everyone. Have a great rest of your Sunday.